Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, back with another Market Watch episode. So today we're covering a few odd pieces that are currently trending from all over the market. Now, none of the cards that we're going to talk about today are going to be huge price shifts that are going to make or break your wallet. However, they are still cards that I think are important to talk about. While it's nice when a $5 card jumps up to 20, I think it's much more fun personally when a $1 card goes to $5 and I just happen to have like 20 copies of it. So the things we're talking about today are definitely still cards to make note of, since they have the potential to bring you a ton of unexpected value. Let's get started. Alright, so starting things off, we're going to take a look at a Chron card. This time it is Chron Sfir. So as we mentioned in the last Market Watch, the Chron deck is getting quite a bit of attention online thanks to the new cards they're getting in Supreme Darkness. It definitely seems like the new cards are really good. Hopefully it's enough to make the deck meta relevant here. I believe that in the OCG, the deck is roughly like tier 2. Sfir is an old card. It can be summoned from the hand or graveyard by discarding a Chron card and then destroying a card you control. Often that is going to be itself. If this card is destroyed, you get to special summon any Chron monster from your deck. Now this is a card that you can send directly to the graveyard with one of the new Chron monsters, so it's really good value, and from all the lists that I've seen online so far, the card is used at either 2 or 3. Now that said, this card unfortunately only has one super rare printing from back in Raging Tempest. A lot of the Chron cards were never reprinted, even in the tins, because they were never really all that meta relevant. With more eyes on the Chron deck now, players seem to be scrambling to pick these up, so we've seen the card go from literally being pennies to now being a solid $3 to $4 card. This is definitely something you can try to dig up out of your foil bulk, because people definitely weren't looking for this card before, since it'll likely be something that a lot of players will be looking for once Supreme Darkness drops. There is one other card I want to talk about that's related to the Chron strategy, but it's not exactly a Chron card. Rather, it is Cyber Dragon Infinity. So this card is one of the most recognizable extra deck monsters in Yu-Gi-Oh! Since it is an Omni Negate and it's this really powerful looking boss monster. The card is definitely usable outside of Cyber Dragon decks. It's often made with Cyber Dragon Nova, since you can make it in rank 5 strategies, and before, a lot of players would make this card with Tellarknight Ptolemaeus, which means rank 4 decks had access to it as well. This time around, the card is getting attention because some of the Chrons are level 5 monsters, including Sfir, so Chrons will try to make 2 level 5s into Cyber Dragon Nova and then into Infinity. Omni Negates are a lot harder to come by now that Baron and Savage Dragon are banned, so that makes Cyber Dragon Infinity a really valuable card to have access to. That said, Infinity does have a ton of printings. It has the maximum gold rare versions, it was in some of the sealed deck products, and I think it was in Dual Overload as well. Despite that, we are seeing all of those lower rarity printings starting to trend upwards. They would only be $1 or so before, but we're seeing a lot of them, even those gold rares that no one really liked, approaching the $5 mark. The one that has jumped the most is of course the original secret rare printing from Breakers of Shadows. Secret first eds are sitting at about $15 now. That said though, I think that this is something that I'd just grab the lower rarity versions of. This card lacks any sort of high rarity printing, so in my opinion this card is basically guaranteed to get a QCR printing in Quarter Century Stampede. Once that happens, all of the existing printings will probably drop in value quite a bit, so if I were you guys, I would just play with the cheaper versions for now. Up next, let's take a look at Orcus Symbol Skeleton. So over in the OCG, the Orcus deck is doing really well. Ryziel getting out of the format and the banning of Abyss Dweller have definitely set up a format where Orcus is able to thrive with their new Link 1 monster. Over the last little while, we've seen cards like QCR Gersu and Alti Galatea trending on the market. However, one of the cards that has kind of slipped under the radar is Symbol Skeleton. This one isn't as strong as Harp Horror. You can banish this card to special summon an Orcus monster from your graveyard. However, this is still a really strong effect, as it doesn't negate the effect of the monster you bring back. So you can bring back something like Gersu and still be able to use both of its effects. Now, while things like Gersu and Harp have multiple holo printings, Symbol Skeleton is actually a card where it's more like Crescendo, where it has very limited printings available. This card was first a rare in Soul Fusion, and then it was a super rare in an OTS tournament pack. The rares used to be under $1, even those are up at $2 to $3 each now. And then with the supers, they were $1 or $2, but they've been climbing over the last month or so and have now hit $7 per copy. This is a card that I see basically every list choosing to run at 3 in the OCG, and given the deck's performance over there, it'll probably be a popular deck here as well. Keep an eye on this card because, of course, it should be a good target for Konami to reprint in the near future, but if not, we could definitely see it continue to go up and hit some ridiculous price points. I do want to take a second to remind all of you to check out our website, MST.merch.com. Now, over at MST.merch.com, we have everything that you will need to optimize your Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournament experience. We have the basics with white, black, pink, and our new purple matted sleeves, which are my personal favorites, as well as smooth and matted sleeves to double sleeve your valuable cards and sleeves with for tournament play. But we also have some other items that you can really use to customize your collection. We have amazing foil sleeves, including some with the MST.TV logo, and dividers and subdividers so that you can keep your collection perfectly organized and easily accessible. Regardless of if you're a competitive or casual player, I'm certain that you'll find something that you will enjoy over at MSTmerch.com. Okay, so this is kind of a random one. We have Surfacing Big Jaws. Now, on the surface, this card does seem like something that would only be used in Water Exceeds decks. However, it's actually a lot more versatile and a little bit less restrictive than I think some people would assume. You can special summon this card from your hand if a spell card was activated this turn, which is a very easy condition to meet, and the only thing it locks you into for the rest of the turn is Exceeds monsters. So on summon, this card searches for a fish shark monster, which I believe is only going to be Drake Shark, who can then summon itself out of the hand very similarly to Poplar. The idea is that this is actually a way to get access to some cool rank 4 plays without burning your normal summon. In cases where your hand is a bit stuck, you can make Duo Drive and attempt to search for some Ryziel cards, but the cool thing is that if you already have access to the Ryziel cards in your rotation, you can simply convert the 2 water monsters into a Bahamut Shark and bring out Totally Awesome. This gets you access to an Omni Negate, and while it does somewhat interfere with you using some of the Ryziel cards, it's still very effective in a way very similar to when you're playing Fiendsmith Ryziel. That said, this card is very new, but not something that's really on very many people's radar. I think Lucas Sacco did a video explaining some of the combos, but that's about it. With this card, the QCR version is up slightly. It was around $20 to $25. It had shot up to $40 at one point, but seems to have settled at around the $30 to $35 range. The other printing of this card is the ultra rare version. They used to be literally only $1 or so. They are now already up to about $3 each, so definitely a card to keep your eye on as the format evolves. Alright, the next card we're looking at and moving on to here is Chamber Dragon Maid. So I think that the Dragon Maid cards don't generally get talked about that much, but they are actually also a really viable strategy after the couple of new support cards that they got over in the OCG. Chamber Dragon Maid is of course one of the best cards that the theme has access to, as it searches for any Dragon Maid spell or trap on summon. Now in the OCG, I do believe that Dragon Maids are a somewhat viable strategy. They're probably a bit more rogue than something like Crystron, but the new fusion monster that they got is really good. To me, however, the really absurd thing is the price of Chamber Dragon Maid. This card has 2 different printings. It did come out a little bit later than the other Dragon Maid cards, so this card was originally a secret rare from Eternity Code, and those are currently sitting at around $20 to $25, which isn't that bad, as that's what they've generally been at for the last year or so. However, the crazy thing to me is that we now have the gold rares from Maximum Gold Eldorado up at the $20 mark as well. The gold rares have always been viewed as being a much uglier rarity than most other things, and it's reflected in how the price of Chamber Dragon Maid has been around $7 for most of the last year. However, it's just the last month or so that this version has jumped as well. The only thing I can really think of with this one is that some players want all of their lower level Dragon Maid monsters to be in the same rarity, and to be fair, secret rare chambers are much harder to find, but either way, I do think this is definitely something that falls into the category of cards you should be looking to sell while they're hyped. Up next, we have System Down. So this card is something that hasn't seen play in quite a while. I believe we used this card back in Cosmo format. It's really simple. You pay 1,000 life points and banish all of your opponent's machines from their field and graveyard. Now it seems that players are looking at System Down as a way to deal with Orcus monsters. Theoretically, you could banish cards like Heart Pourer, Girsu, and Symbol Skeleton, and cut off a lot of their interactions. However, I don't think that System Down will be as good as players think it'll be. Yes, it's gonna deal with problem monsters, but it's really just not a great use of side deck space. There are other strong cards that you can use against Orcus, such as the Bestials, Dominus Impulse, and DD Crow, and those cards are good in a variety of matchups, whereas System Down is really only going to be good against the one deck, so it would likely be a much more efficient use of space to use other side deck choices instead. However, it does seem that people are still hyping up System Down, so we're seeing all versions of it starting to trend upwards. Most notably, we have the ultimate rares from Cybernetic Revolution. The most that we've seen them move for is around $25 to $30 on TCG Player. I think the cheapest Ulti First Ed right now is $70. Aside from that, the only other holo printing is the super rare version from an OTS tournament pack. They're historically only a couple of dollars, but they're now up to $8 each. Aside from that, there's a few common and rare printings that are worth a couple bucks each, maybe just worth setting aside out of bulk if you do find them. However, I don't think that this card is ultimately going to see very much play, so it's probably something that you should look to move if you have the opportunity to do so. And finally, the last card we have for today is Nader Servant. So this card is something that we haven't seen too much of recently. It's just something that's been seeing some usage online, primarily on the DB Grinders channel. DB Grinder is showing a bunch of replays of decks after the release of Supreme Darkness, which includes a bunch of cards, but primarily is Twins of the Eclipse and the new Mitsurugi archetype. It seems that some of these builds are using the Nader Servant engine early on, with 3 Nader Servant and 1 Dogmatica Maximus. The idea is that you can get a bunch of extra deck monsters to the graveyard and trigger their effects, so Garura to draw, Herald of the Arclight to search, and Elder Entity Endis to pop a card. Now, I personally haven't started looking at Supreme Darkness format yet at all. I have a regional for this format this upcoming Saturday, but I guess a bunch of people are picking up this card, assuming that it's going to be good based on the replays. The important thing to remember is that if you do use this card and Maximus, you can't special summon from the extra deck for the rest of the turn. So if you do your stuff and you aren't locked into 4s, you can still get some pretty cool value off of this engine. Anyways, thankfully Nader Servant was reprinted in Rarity Collection 1, so you can still pick up cheap copies of the card if you'd like. However, the QCR version has shot up a lot. This card was down at around $15 or so when it wasn't seeing very much play. About a month or two ago, this was around $22, and now this card is up at $35, with very few quantities available on TCG Player before it hits $40. So basically, it has doubled in price within the last month. Definitely a cool card, but only time will tell us whether or not this card is actually going to be as meta relevant as people are speculating. Alright guys, that is all we have for today's episode. Definitely interesting to keep an eye on the OCG format because we see so many things that are changing all the time, but their game is so different. But it's like players here in the TCG are always trying to speculate on what's going to be the next big thing, and they're trying to buy out things based on the OCG market, so only certain things will hit here. I don't know. It's really, really cool to see, but it's also really interesting to see how our format is different from theirs, and you know, kind of where the information asymmetry kind of takes place so that we can take advantage of it, so that we know what's going on with the market. Anyways guys, if you did enjoy today's Market Watch episode, please make sure you let me know by hitting that thumbs up button. Make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, and until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.